For 2 years, the map only moved one direction, red, expanding, slowly, painfully, meter by meter, but always forward. Russia was grinding through Ukrainian defenses with wave after wave of human assaults, burning through men and machines at a rate that would bankrupt any rational country. And it was working. By January 2026, Russia had captured Huliaipole, a critical logistics hub just 80 kilometers east of Zaporozhye city. The path to Ukraine's sixth largest city was open. No major fortifications, no natural barriers, just flat, empty steppe all the way to the Dnipro River. For the first time since 2022, a major Ukrainian city was genuinely at risk of being besieged. Then something happened that nobody predicted. In February 2026, SpaceX disabled every unauthorized Starlink terminal on the Russian side of the front line. Overnight, Russian troops lost their satellite internet. Their drone operators went blind. Their command posts went silent. Their coordination collapsed. And Ukraine, which had been quietly massing elite airborne units in the south, attacked. In 5 days, Ukrainian forces liberated more than 200 square kilometers. That's roughly equivalent to everything Russia had gained in the entire month of December. Within weeks, that number climbed to 400, then 460. 8 settlements recaptured. The Dnipropetrovsk region nearly fully cleared. For the first time since the Kursk operation in 2024, Ukraine recaptured more territory in a single month than Russia seized during the same period. Russia's spring offensive hadn't even started yet, and Ukraine had already gutted its staging ground. To understand why this counteroffensive matters, you need to understand what Russia was trying to do, and how close it came to succeeding. Through the second half of 2025, Russia's Dnipro group of forces had been pushing westward from Donetsk Oblast along 2 axes. The first ran through the Huliaipole direction in central Zaporizhia Oblast. The second, the Oleksandrivka axis, ran along the border between Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk Oblasts. The idea was to approach Zaporizhia city from multiple directions simultaneously, bypassing Ukraine's heavily fortified east-west defensive lines. It was working. By December 2025, Russian forces had crossed 2 key terrain features, the Haicher and Vovcha rivers, that Ukraine had counted on as defensive anchors. They captured Huliaipole itself in January 2026, and they pushed into the Dnipropetrovsk region, seizing roughly 450 square kilometers of territory between December and January. The Ukrainian General Staff was alarmed. Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky acknowledged that the situation had deteriorated and that Russian forces were numerically superior. Southern Defense Forces spokesman Vladislav Voloshin reported that Russia was launching over 400 artillery strikes per day on Ukrainian positions in the sector. But here's what Russia didn't know. Ukraine was already planning its response, and it was about to get a gift from space. In early February 2026, SpaceX enforced strict verification controls on Starlink terminals operating in and around Ukraine. Every unregistered terminal, meaning every terminal that Russian forces had smuggled, stolen, or purchased through intermediaries, went dark. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic for Russia. According to Andrei Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Moscow City Duma, the shutdown created a crisis on the front lines, as Russian troops lost the ability to coordinate operations. The BBC's military analyst Ilya Abashev told the Moscow Times that the shutdown deprived the Russian army of the ability to use Starlink-linked targeting systems for medium and long-range attack drones. Russian FPV drone operators, who rely on satellite internet to control their aircraft beyond line of sight, were suddenly grounded. Command posts that had been receiving real-time intelligence feeds went silent. The Russian military had become addicted to Starlink. They used it for drone operations, for inter-unit communications, for accessing Telegram channels that served as their primary battlefield messaging system. Many units didn't have backup systems because Starlink was so reliable and so good that nothing else came close. It's like building your entire military communications architecture on someone else's Wi-Fi and then being shocked when the password changes. Except the password change happened in the middle of a war, and the guy who changed it is Elon Musk. The Kremlin tried to spin it. Putin appeared in a clearly choreographed video call with a military servicewoman, casually discussing operations as though nothing had changed. The defense ministry insisted drone systems remained operational, but the frontline troops knew the truth. Without Starlink, they couldn't fly reconnaissance drones beyond a few hundred meters. They couldn't relay target coordinates from scouts to artillery batteries in real time. They couldn't send the telegram messages that had become their primary command and control system, because the Kremlin had simultaneously cracked down on Telegram itself, creating a double communications blackout that left some units completely isolated. Russian units scrambled for workarounds. Some moved communications equipment away from the front and tried to link forward positions through ground-based Wi-Fi relays. Others mounted large antennas on rooftops, which Ukrainian drone operators immediately started targeting. Russia's FSB reportedly recruited agents to register Starlink terminals under Ukrainian identities, but SpaceX identified and blocked those too. The Kremlin's long-term solution? Build their own satellite constellation called Rusviet. The first 16 experimental satellites were supposed to launch in 2025. They've been postponed indefinitely. Russia needs 300 satellites minimum to match Starlink's coverage. They have 0. Building a Starlink competitor from scratch while under sanctions and fighting a war is like trying to build a boat while you're already drowning. Good luck with that. Ukraine's leadership saw the Starlink shutdown and made a calculated decision: sacrifice ground in the north to strike hard in the south. Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi pulled elite assault units, including the 425th Assault Regiment and Australian-donated Abrams tanks, from the Pokrovsk axis and redeployed them south to reinforce the Huliai-Pole sector. He accepted that Russia would make incremental gains around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad in exchange for a chance to reverse the situation in the southeast. It was a gamble. Pokrovsk was already under heavy pressure. Giving Russia even small gains there was politically risky and operationally painful. But Syrskyi understood something that the Russian command apparently didn't. The path to Zaporizhia city was a far greater strategic threat than a few more blocks in Pokrovsk. Lose Zaporizhia, and you lose an industrial hub, a river crossing, and the morale of an entire region. Lose a few villages near Pokrovsk, and you lose a few villages near Pokrovsk. The counteroffensive launched in mid-February. Ukrainian airborne and assault brigades attacked from the west and north, targeting the areas where Russian forces had crossed the Haichur and Vovcha rivers. The timing was devastating. Russian units were still reeling from the Starlink shutdown, unable to coordinate effectively, unable to fly drones for reconnaissance, unable to communicate with their own headquarters. In the first 5 days, Ukraine liberated over 200 square kilometers, the fastest territorial gains since the 2023 counteroffensive. The Atlantic Council reported that this was roughly equivalent to the Russian army's gains throughout the whole month of December, erased in less than a week. By late February, Ukraine's air assault forces officially confirmed the operation. Southern Defense Forces spokesman Voloshin told RBC Ukraine that counterattack and assault operations on the Huliai-Pole and Oleksandrivka axes had restored control over territory exceeding 300 square kilometers. Ukrainian forces were conducting up to 50 engagements daily. By mid-March, the number hit 400 square kilometers, 8 settlements recaptured. Dnipropetrovsk Oblast was nearly fully cleared. Major General Alexander Komarenko told RBC Ukraine that only 3 small settlements remained to be cleared, and 2 others needed mopping up operations. President Zelensky told the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera in early March that Ukraine had reclaimed 460 square kilometers since the start of the year. Putin lost his winter offensive, Zelensky said. With the arrival of warmth, hope is being reborn. This wasn't just about recapturing territory. It was about destroying Russia's battle plan for the entire year. The Institute for the Study of War assessed that Ukraine's counterattacks were generating tactical, operational, and strategic effects that may disrupt Russia's spring-summer 2026 offensive campaign plan. Russia had intended to use the Huliai-Pole area as a launchpad for a 2-pronged advance on Zaporizhia city. One push from the east through Huliai-Pole, another from the southeast through Orikhiv. Ukraine's counteroffensive collapsed the eastern prong entirely, but the ripple effects went far beyond Zaporizhia. Ukrainian military observer Konstantin Mashovets reported in early April that the counterattacks forced Russia to redeploy a significant part of the 120th Naval Infantry Division from the Baltic Fleet and the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade from the Pacific Fleet from the Dobropilya tactical area to the Oleksandrivka direction. Elements of the 68th Army Corps from the Eastern Military District also moved south from the Pokrovsk area. Every unit Russia pulls south is a unit it can't use elsewhere. The ISW tracked this pattern. As Russia shifted naval infantry to plug the gaps in the south, the intensity of operations around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad decreased. Mashovets noted that heavy losses that Russian forces have suffered in the seizure of Pokrovsk and in the Dobropilya tactical area have forced the Russian central grouping of forces to reduce the intensity of its operations. Ukraine's counteroffensive created a dilemma that Russia's overstretched forces couldn't solve. Reinforce the south and lose momentum in the east, or ignore the south and risk losing everything gained since 2025. Either way, Russia's spring offensive timeline was shattered. They went from planning an advance on Zaporizhzhia city to fighting to hold territory they'd already captured. It's the military equivalent of punching someone in the stomach while they're winding up for a haymaker. Their whole body folds forward, and the haymaker never lands. Zoom out further, and the trend is even more striking. According to Al Jazeera's analysis of ISW data, Russia's rate of territorial advance has been cut by 2/3 over the past 18 months. Russian forces averaged 14.9 square kilometers per day from October 2024 to March 2025. That dropped to 10.66 square kilometers per day through October 2025. And in the first 3 months of 2026, it fell to just 5.5 square kilometers per day. Russia Matters, a project run by Harvard's Belfer Center, reported that in the 4-week period from March 3rd to March 31st, 2026, Russian forces actually lost 12 square miles of Ukrainian territory. That's the first net loss in months. Meanwhile, Russia's human cost is accelerating. Zelensky stated that Russia is losing 35,000 troops per month, killed and wounded. Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi said that FPV drones now account for 90% of Russian casualties. Russia's total losses since the full-scale invasion have exceeded 1 million soldiers, with around 500,000 unable to ever return to the front lines. The Ryazan region's governor signed a decree in March, forcing businesses with more than 150 employees to select workers for military service, essentially industrial-scale conscription. Russia's defense budget was cut for 2026, the first reduction since the invasion began, and Ukraine has been systematically destroying Russia's war production capacity, striking the Promzintez explosives plant in Samara, which produces 30,000 tons of military explosives annually. Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation estimated that Russia has lost 45% of its missile production capacity through deep strikes. Russia is still advancing in some areas. It still holds roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory. The war is far from over, but the trajectory has shifted. Russia spent 2 years on offense. Now it's spending more and more resources just to hold what it already has. There's one more dimension to this story that the mainstream coverage keeps missing. Small Wars Journal published an analysis in early April noting that Ukrainian forces have quietly recaptured hundreds of square kilometers in the Zaporizhzhia sector, surpassing the territorial gains of the much-publicized 2023 counteroffensive. The key word is quietly. Ukraine deliberately suppressed public messaging about these advances to avoid the credibility damage from the 2023 counteroffensive, where overpromising and under-delivering destroyed public confidence. This time, Ukraine learned its lesson. No grand announcements, no Western media embeds filming the breakthrough, no NAFO memes celebrating captured villages, just methodical, patient operations that reclaimed ground while the world's attention was focused on Iran, on Hungary's election, on the €90 billion EU loan. Syrskyi put it this way: "We are trying to seize operational initiative and force the Russians to play by our rules." That's not the language of a military on its heels. That's the language of a military that's found its rhythm. The 2023 counteroffensive was a sprint. This is a marathon. And marathons are won by the side that can sustain effort, not the side that burns brightest in the first mile. So let's be clear about what just happened. Russia spent 6 months pushing towards Zaporizhzhia city. They crossed 2 rivers. They captured a critical logistics hub. They seized 450 square kilometers of territory. The path to Ukraine's 6th largest city was wide open. Then, SpaceX flipped a switch, Ukraine attacked, and in 5 weeks, half of those gains were erased. Russia's spring offensive timeline was wrecked. Its naval infantry was pulled off other fronts. Its rate of advance dropped by 2/3. And for the first time since 2024, Ukraine liberated more territory in a month than Russia captured. None of this means Ukraine is winning in the traditional sense. Russia still occupies a fifth of the country. The front line is still 1,200 kilometers long. The human cost on both sides is staggering, and the war could go on for years. But the narrative that Russia's victory was inevitable, that Ukraine could only delay, never reverse, that narrative took a serious hit in February and March 2026. Ukraine proved it can still attack, it can still surprise, and when Russia makes a mistake, Ukraine will make it pay. Meanwhile, Ukraine's own capabilities keep growing. Zelensky announced agreements with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, Iraq, and Bahrain to export Ukrainian drone know-how in exchange for joint production support. These Gulf states are interested in Ukraine's experience building layered drone defense systems, the same systems that are shredding Russian armor on the front line every single day. Siersky reported that in March alone, the number of combat sorties by drone interceptors and targets destroyed increased by 55% compared to February. Defense Minister Fedorov said that Ukraine's purchases of engineering mines and drone ammunition in the first 3 months of 2026 already equaled more than half of all purchases made in 2025, and predicted they would be significantly higher by year's end. And Ukraine hasn't stopped hitting Russia's ability to sustain this war. The General Staff confirmed strikes on the Promsyntez explosives plant in Samara using domestically produced Flamingo drones. That single facility produces 30,000 tons of military explosives annually. Geolocated footage showed massive secondary explosions. Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation estimated that Russia has now lost 45% of its missile production capacity through systematic deep strikes on defense factories. Russia also banned refined petrol exports from April through July to stabilize domestic prices, a direct consequence of Ukrainian attacks on refineries. Russia is still fighting, but it's fighting with a shrinking industrial base, a communications infrastructure built on stolen Wi-Fi, and a spring offensive that was gutted before it even launched. So here's my question. Russia built its entire offensive strategy on a communications system owned by an American billionaire. When that system got pulled, they had nothing to fall back on. What does that tell you about the real state of Russia's military-industrial capability? And if Ukraine can do this much damage with a Starlink shutdown and a few redeployed brigades, what happens if Western support actually increases? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you're new. We break down the real military analysis. No hype, no propaganda, just what's actually happening on the ground. I'll see you in the next one.